What if the most profound horrors are not found in the cosmos, but buried beneath the very waves that cradle our continents? What if the ocean, vast and unknowable, is not merely a basin of water, but a living archive, holding secrets too terrible to be forgotten, too ancient to be understood? For generations, we have gazed upon its surface, believing ourselves masters of the visible world, unaware of the abyssal intelligences that stir in its lightless heart. Imagine a lineage cursed not by a supernatural entity, but by the echoes of a past scientific hubris, a forgotten chapter of exploration that dared to pierce the veil of the deepest blue. This is not a work of fiction, but a chilling account meticulously unearthed from the forgotten corners of American history, a story of an inheritance as liquid and terrifying as the abyssal waters it sprang from. It is the narrative of the Moreland family and their generational descent into a darkness awakened by the human desire to conquer the last true frontier, the Puerto Rico Trench. Along the rugged, salt-battered coast of northern Puerto Rico stands a lighthouse, a sentinel of stone and sorrow. Its lamp, meant to guide, has instead borne witness to a creeping shadow, an ancient compact signed not with ink, but with the very essence of the deep. Here, the relentless roar of the Atlantic whispers of forgotten pacts, of ships lost not to storms, but to something far more deliberate, far more patient. This is the Devil's Sea, a place where the light of human understanding falters, and where an unimaginable presence has patiently waited. The moorlands, bound by an insidious, hereditary affliction, a somnambulism that drags them into the ocean's embrace, vivid nightmares of cyclopean depths, and an undeniable magnetic pull towards the deepest waters. Their ancestor, a disgraced cartographer from the infamous 1873 Deepwater Revelation expedition, vanished without a trace, leaving only cryptic charts and a family line forever entangled with something monstrous, something that defies every known principle of biology and physics. Now, with Elias Moreland's younger sister, Lena, succumbing to the curse, her episodes intensifying with chilling physical transformations and desperate attempts to return to the sea, uttering guttural words in a language unknown to man, the family's darkest truth can no longer be suppressed. Her terrifying regression forces Elias to open the long-sealed archives, to seek answers where only madness seemed to dwell. This is their desperate struggle, not just for survival, but for redemption. They must understand and sever an ancient, primordial bond with something that lurks in the very heart of the Puerto Rico Trench. For if they fail, their lineage will become unwilling vessels for an intelligence that predates humanity, destined to usher in an oceanic reckoning. When the ocean remembers, what hope does a family have against the tides of an ancient, vengeful past? Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal may change your perception of the oceans forever. Are you ready to join us on this journey into the unknown depths? When Lena's terrifying regression escalated beyond any rational explanation, Elias Moreland understood he could no longer bear this silent burden alone. His desperate search for answers led him far from the salt-blasted bluff, past the whispers of local legend, to the very heart of American deep-sea research. He found an unlikely ally, or so he hoped, in Dr. Eris Thorne, a distinguished oceanographer and senior research fellow at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, a man whose reputation was built not on conjecture, but on the cold, hard data dredged from the deepest parts of the Pacific. Dr. Thorne was a titan in his field, known for his uncompromising adherence to the scientific method, and his almost legendary skepticism towards anything that bordered on the pseudoscientific. His office, filled with sonar charts, hydrophone readouts, and geological core samples, was a testament to a life dedicated to empirical truth. He had spent decades methodically dissecting oceanic anomalies, disproving countless tall tales of sea monsters and phantom vessels with meticulous analysis and irrefutable evidence. For Thorne, the ocean was a complex, yet ultimately explainable system, governed by physics and biology, not by ancient curses or reawakened entities. He viewed the vast, unexplored abyssal plains as zones awaiting discovery, not domains of the inexplicable. When Elias first presented his fractured narrative, a tale of hereditary nightmares, somnambulism, and a family line tethered to a vanished 19th-century expedition into the Puerto Rico Trench, Thorne listened with a practiced, almost clinical detachment. He saw it as a fascinating psychological case study, perhaps a manifestation of inherited trauma or a collective delusion, certainly not a literal connection to an ancient malevolent force. His initial assessment was clear. This was a matter for neurologists and psychologists, not an oceanographer. He spoke of sleep disorders, genetic predispositions to anxiety, and the powerful influence of local folklore on vulnerable minds. Yet, Elias had brought more than just a family history. He had meticulously gathered fragments, copies of the disgraced cartographer's cryptic charts, unsettlingly precise for their era, depicting anomalies far beyond known bathymetry. Records of unexplained phenomena surrounding the 1873 Deepwater Revelation expedition, dismissed by history as mere navigational errors or tragic misjudgments, but bearing a chilling resemblance to the moorland's current plight. Thorne, while dismissive of the supernatural claims, was professionally intrigued by the historical discrepancies and the cartographic precision that defied the technology of the time. This was not the stuff of ghosts, but perhaps a forgotten yet significant historical anomaly. His scientific curiosity, despite his skepticism, was piqued. The challenge for him was to unravel the quantifiable, the verifiable, and to logically explain away the rest. His approach was systematic. Gather all available data, cross-reference, analyze, and only then draw conclusions. This was his methodology, his bulwark against the unexplainable. He agreed to consult, not as a believer in curses, but as a scientist seeking a rational explanation for puzzling yet undeniably real historical and contemporary occurrences. The silent dread that had long shadowed the moorland line found its grotesque voice in Lena. Her somnambulism, once a mere eccentricity, morphed into a terrifying ritual. We witnessed not just sleepwalking, but a profound physical transformation. Her skin, usually worn with life, grew cool, almost slick, like a creature of the deep. Her eyes, open but unseeing, would shimmer with an unnatural iridescence in the dim light of dawn, reflecting not the room, but perhaps the blackness of an unfathomable ocean. And the words, fragmented and guttural, tearing from her throat in a language no human had ever articulated, chilling us to the very bone. It was not human speech, but something ancient, a primal echo from the dawn of time, calling her relentlessly towards the sea. Elias, her older brother, bore witness to Lena's harrowing regression, a mirror reflecting the family's crumbling sanity. The very air around her seemed to thicken, heavy with the scent of salt and primordial decay. It was a smell that clung to the old lighthouse, but now it emanated from her, a living, breathing testament to an insidious bond. He knew then with a terrible certainty that the whispers of their ancestors were no longer confined to the dusty attic stories. They were a living plague, consuming his sister from within. The time for denial was over. The meticulously suppressed family archives, locked away for generations, held the only answers. He dove into the labyrinth of yellowed ledgers and brittle maps, seeking a logic, a truth, however horrific, that could explain Lena's unraveling. Among the forgotten journals, Elias unearthed the chilling legacy of Alistair Morland, the disgraced cartographer. His ancestor not merely vanished, but erased from official records, a ghost story whispered only in hushed tones within the family. Alistair was part of the infamous 1873 Deepwater Revelation expedition, an undertaking shrouded in mystery, ostensibly a groundbreaking survey of the newly discovered Puerto Rico Trench. But Alistair's personal logs, panned in a frantic, often illegible hand, spoke of something far grander, far more terrifying than geological survey. They hinted at a discovery that tore at the very fabric of human understanding, a breach into a realm that should have remained forever undisturbed. His entries grew increasingly erratic, filled with sketches of impossible geometries and cryptic references to the Watchers and the deep's silent demand. He chronicled not merely the depths of the ocean, but the descent of the human mind into a primordial madness. What did Alistair truly witness in the abyssal darkness of 1873? What secrets did he carry back, not in his mind, but etched into the very bloodline of the Morlands, a price for the revelation he had unearthed? The answer, Elias began to fear, was not merely a family curse, but an ancient pact, awakened by the intrusion of humanity into a domain it was never meant to comprehend. And the ocean, it seemed, was now coming to collect its due. For Elias, the Morland family archives were a stark confrontation with generations of whispered fears. Each brittle page, each faded photograph, bore testament to an inherited malady. Lena's terrifying regression proved this curse no sudden blight. Its tendrils stretched back, thin and almost imperceptible, from the moment their ancestor, the disgraced cartographer, vanished into the abyssal void of the 1873 Deepwater Revelation expedition. What dark knowledge did he bring back before the sea claimed him? The initial anomalies were subtle. The first generation spoke of unsettling dreams, vivid, oceanic nightmares, leaving them gasping, drenched in phantom brine. An inexplicable, magnetic pull towards the ocean's edge, a silent yearning call, defied reason. Late 19th century journals detail sleepwalking, not through quiet New England homes, but towards the coast. Found hours later, shivering on moonlit beaches, uttering disjointed words of crushing pressure and unseen light. These were the nascent whispers of the deep, a prelude to greater horrors. As generations passed, anomalies grew more pronounced, more insidious. Somnambulism intensified, morphing into unsettling episodes where family members attempted to breach locked doors, driven by unseen compulsion. A 1927 entry recounts a moorland matriarch, known for her quiet demeanor, found clawing at hardened garden earth, convinced she was digging for something ancient. Her eyes, the journal describes, momentarily took on an unnerving iridescent sheen, like something pulled from the deepest trenches. Then came physical manifestations, fleeting, easily dismissed as delusions. A sudden cold clamminess of skin, a brief imperceptible elongation of fingers, or an odd, slick hair texture. These ephemeral changes hinted at something profound, a deep cellular shift mirroring the ocean's transformative power. The Moreland family history, compiled by Elias's great-aunt, became less a family tree and more a descent into growing horror, each branch bearing fruit of increasing obsession with unplumbed depths. The catalyst of the 1873 voyage, the Deepwater Revelation, remained a phantom limb in their collective memory. What truly was revealed? The disgraced cartographer, upon his ill-fated return, left behind not only a cursed family, but fragments of his work. Chillingly detailed charts depicting abyssal landscapes defying known geography, marked with symbols no human hand could conceive. These were not maps, but windows into an impossible reality, adorned with creatures writhing from the ink. Through these charts, preserved in a hidden compartment, Elias began to piece together their torment's true origin. What terrifying visions did these pioneers of the deep truly encounter in the crushing darkness? How did those fleeting glimpses of the abyss bind an entire lineage to its primordial will? The answers, Elias suspected, lay not just in the past, but in the relentless, escalating horror of his sister's present. Elias Moreland, haunted by his sister Lena's terrifying regression, found himself consumed by the dust-laden archives of his own family's past. Each brittle page, each faded photograph, seemed to whisper of a truth deliberately buried, a secret so profound it had been meticulously suppressed for generations. The desperate need to understand Lena's accelerating descent, her chilling attempts to return to the sea, uttering those guttural alien sounds, drove him deeper into the forgotten legacy. He sought not merely answers, but a weapon against an affliction that was consuming his lineage. It was amidst the decaying nautical charts, tucked away within a reinforced, iron-bound chest, that he unearthed a revelation. Not a single document, but a collection. A hand-stitched leather logbook, its cover scarred by salt and time, and a series of meticulously drawn but incomplete hydrographic charts of the very trench that now beckoned his sister. These were no ordinary navigational records. They bore the unmistakable signature of Barnaby Moreland, the disgraced cartographer, his ancestor, and the specter who had vanished during the infamous 1873 Deepwater Revelation expedition. The logbook entries, written in Barnaby's elegant yet increasingly frantic hand, painted a picture far grimmer than any academic record. They spoke of the expedition's initial triumphs, the pioneering dives into unprecedented depths, and then a slow, creeping horror. Barnaby chronicled not just soundings and currents, but an escalating series of anomalies, impossible bioluminescent patterns pulsing in the black water, resonating frequencies that defied known physics, and a pervasive, almost palpable sense of being watched. He described a specific incident deep within the trench, where their experimental deep-sea apparatus encountered something vast, indistinct, and profoundly ancient. An event he cryptically referred to as the stirring. His later entries devolved into feverish scrawls, obsessed with a peculiar recurring symbol he'd sketched repeatedly, a complex, geometric design, almost organic in its fluidity, appearing within the strange light patterns he observed. This symbol, Barnaby theorized, was not merely an optical illusion. He believed it was a form of communication, a resonant frequency, a signature of something that predated human comprehension, something that had been disturbed. "It has remembered us," one chilling entry read, and it demands recompense for the slumber we so rudely shattered. It seeks a vessel. Elias's hands trembled as he held the logbook. This wasn't merely a record of discovery. It was a confession, a testament to a pact unknowingly forged. Barnaby's detailed observations, once dismissed as the ravings of a man driven mad by the deep, now resonated with chilling precision, mirroring Lena's own symptoms: the somnambulism, the oceanic nightmares, the magnetic pull towards the very coordinates Barnaby had painstakingly charted as the epicenter of the stirring. The historical discovery confirmed it all. The moorland curse was not an accident of nature, but a deliberate, generational claim, a slow, insidious consumption by an intelligence that had awakened from an ancient sleep. This terrifying historical discovery was not an answer, but a horrifying confirmation. It stripped away the veil of scientific detachment, revealing a raw, primordial connection between his family and the unfathomable darkness of the Puerto Rico Trench. What had Barnaby Moorland truly unleashed in the abyss, and why did its ancient hunger now echo so powerfully in the very bloodline that had disturbed its slumber? The shadows lengthened across the moorland property, but inside, a different kind of darkness was taking hold. Lena's episodes, once confined to restless nights and whispered pleas, had begun to consume her waking hours. The somnambulism had mutated, transforming into a waking trance, her eyes glazed with an otherworldly luminescence, fixed on an unseen horizon. Elias watched, helpless, as the sister he knew began to recede, replaced by a vessel for something ancient and hungry. The physical transformations were the most terrifying manifestation. Her skin, once warm and supple, now took on an unnerving translucence, a pallid sheen that seemed to hum with an internal pressure. Beneath the surface, the faint, branching lines of what appeared to be an intricate vascular system pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, a complex web that migrated subtly each day, almost like phosphorescent roots spreading beneath her skin. Her fingers elongated, digits unnaturally slender and agile, and her nails thickened, acquiring a hardened, almost chitinous quality. But it was her voice, once soft and melodic, that delivered the truest horror. The fragmented words she uttered were no longer just pleas for the sea. They coalesced into guttural syllables, a language unlike any known tongue, a series of clicks and low rumbles that resonated with the primal echo of deep ocean trenches. It was a language that spoke of unimaginable pressure, of lightless voids, of a consciousness that predated the very concept of human speech. One harrowing dawn, Elias found Lena by the storm-battered rocks near the lighthouse, her body rigid, convulsing in silent communion with the churning Atlantic. Her lips moved, forming the alien words, her face contorted in an expression of desperate longing and immense pain. It was then, seeing his sister utterly lost to this monstrous inheritance, that Elias finally understood. This was no mere illness. This was a claiming. The curse was not dormant. It was awake, and it was ravenous. He retreated to the crumbling library, a room saturated with the scent of salt and forgotten paper. For generations, the Moorlands had suppressed this truth, locking away the legacy in meticulously sealed archives. Now, desperation spurred him. He tore through mildewed ledgers, brittle journals, and charts yellowed by time and neglect. What he unearthed went beyond cryptic warnings. It was a chronicle of complicity. His ancestor, the disgraced cartographer from the 1873 Deepwater Revelation expedition, had not merely vanished. He had recorded in fevered, looping script the first undeniable contact. Detailed sketches, horrifying in their precision, depicted not just geological formations, but vast, sinuous forms, almost architectural in their organic complexity, rising from the deepest parts of the Puerto Rico Trench. One entry, dated days before his disappearance, read, "It remembers. It demands a bond. And the price? The price is blood through the generations." The truth was a colder, more devastating abyss than any ocean. Lena was not just suffering from a hereditary affliction. She was undergoing a transformation, a metamorphosis, into something that was not human, something that served an ancient intelligence. What was it that had truly been revealed in 1873? What ancient pact had his ancestor forged in the inky blackness of the Puerto Rico Trench? And what terrifying destiny awaited not just Lena, but the entire Moreland lineage, as they became unwilling vessels for the vengeance of a phantom abyss? The urgency gripping Elias Moreland was a cold, constricting hand. Lena's episodes worsened, her voice a horrifying symphony of clicks and guttural utterances, echoing nothing human. Intervention was paramount, yet every door slammed shut. Marine biology departments, historical societies, all met his pleas with polite incredulity. The Deepwater Revelation Expedition of 1873, cornerstone of his family's torment, was dismissed as an ill-fated venture, marred by poor data and his ancestor Josiah Moreland's disappearance. This official narrative starkly contradicted the chilling reality festering within the Moreland lineage. How could an event so impactful, spawning generations of affliction, be so thoroughly erased from collective memory? Here lay a gnawing paradox. Elias sifted through microfiche and yellowed newspaper clippings. They hinted at more than mishap, speaking of a shipwreck of the soul, of crewmen returned with shattered minds, muttering unspeakable horrors. These were the whispers the official record chose to ignore. Truths buried beneath academic revisionism. The fragments Lena spoke offered no solace, only deeper mystery. Elias recorded them, analyzing against ancient lexicons. But the sounds were alien, a language seemingly born of pressure and darkness, devoid of familiar phonetic structures. It felt less like a forgotten tongue, more like a primal resonance from a world never meant to interact with ours. A terrifying thought. The curse was not merely psychological, but a biological, linguistic imprint from something truly non-human. He unearthed a forgotten diary fragment from a lower-ranking crewman on the Triton from the 1873 expedition. The entry, just days before the disaster, described, "The very water sings around us, a low thrumming, pulling at the timbers. It feels alive." Josiah has become obsessed with the currents, speaking of a threshold and a guardian. Guardian? What could be guarded in the lifeless abyss? This cryptic note sent a shiver down Elias's spine. Official reports cited only errors and a storm. Yet here was a personal account hinting at something far more deliberate, sentient, at play in the depths. The more Elias delved, the clearer it became. The 1873 expedition hadn't simply failed. It had discovered something so profound, so terrifying, its very existence had been systematically suppressed. Was it fear of the unknown, or something more sinister? The paradox deepened. A truth so potent, it required erasure, yet continued to manifest in the cursed bloodline. As Elias unearthed more, a chilling pattern emerged. The Deepwater Revelation was not isolated, but part of a larger global phenomenon the world had chosen to forget. What secrets truly lie buried in those archives, waiting for someone brave enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to unearth them? And what would happen if the world were forced to remember? Are you ready to uncover the secrets of the deep? Elias, now fully immersed in the depths of his family's hidden legacy, began to piece together fragments that defied logical explanation. His initial encounters with the tattered journals and faded navigational charts of his ancestor, a man only known as Thomas Moreland, were unsettling. But as he delved deeper, a more sinister pattern emerged. The conventional markings on the charts, detailing bathymetric soundings and currents, often gave way to strange, anachronistic symbols, glyphs that bore no resemblance to any known nautical or cartographic tradition. These weren't mere artistic flourishes. They were meticulously drawn, often overlapping vital data points, as if deliberately obscuring or perhaps highlighting something else entirely. It was in these hidden marks that the true horror of the 1873 Deepwater Revelation expedition began to surface. The official records of that ill-fated voyage spoke of uncharted currents and unforeseen geological shifts as the cause of Thomas Moreland's disappearance. Yet, within his personal logbooks, Elias found increasingly frantic entries describing not seismic activity, but a profound, almost sentient disturbance originating from the deepest troughs. Thomas's descriptions, initially scientific observations, devolved into feverish, poetic warnings about an abyssal guardian. And the echoing maw, he wrote of the pressure not just on the submersible, but on the mind, a silent, pervasive influence that sought entry, not by force, but by invitation. The expedition's true objective, it now appeared, was not merely to map the Puerto Rico Trench, but to investigate strange energy signatures detected by fledgling, experimental deep-sea sensors, a detail meticulously redacted from public records. These were not the ramblings of a man driven mad by isolation. They were the terrifying testament of a witness. What chilled Elias most was the chilling parallel between his ancestors' descent into obsession and Lena's current state. The very glyphs scrawled in the margins of Thomas's charts, swirling patterns reminiscent of cyclonic water, or perhaps something more organic and grotesque, began appearing in Lena's somnambulistic sketches. And the guttural sounds she now uttered, incomprehensible to any linguist consulted, seemed to echo phrases found repeated with desperate urgency in Thomas's final, almost illegible entries. Cathar, Flimar, the debt. A language perhaps not meant for human tongues, an ancient dialect of the deep. Could this truly be a hereditary memory? A shared resonance across generations with an entity so profound, so alien, that it imprinted itself upon the very genetic code of the Moreland lineage? The question loomed. If Thomas Moreland had merely vanished, how had this knowledge, this insidious connection, been passed down? And what was the true nature of the debt that Lena, a century and a half later, was now being forced to repay? The answers, Elias feared, lay not in historical documents, but in the living nightmare unfolding before his eyes. Are we truly just inheritors of memory, or mere conduits for an ancient force's relentless designs? In the crushing silence of the abyss, where light is a forgotten myth and the very concept of up or down loses all meaning, did humanity truly make its first contact, not with life, but with something far older, far more profound? The year was 1873, and the ill-fated Deepwater Revelation expedition plunged into the uncharted chasms of the Puerto Rico Trench, an audacious, almost reckless foray into the planet's unknown heart. Their mission? To chart the deepest points, to claim dominion over the very edges of existence. Among them, a brilliant but increasingly disquieted cartographer, Elias Morland's distant ancestor, moved with a meticulous precision that belied a growing dread. He was tasked with mapping the unseen, translating pressure and echo into contours of an alien landscape. As their bathysphere descended further than any human had dared before, a peculiar anomaly began to register. Not a seismic shift, nor a thermal vent, but a resonant hum, a pulse that seemed to originate not from geological activity, but from a deliberate, unseen source. Instruments designed to measure the inert environment flickered, registering impossible energies. The ancestor, hunched over his charts, felt it first as a prickling unease, then as a profound, internal vibration that resonated in his bones, not unlike the low thrum of a leviathan's song, yet infinitely more complex. Was this the true revelation they sought? Not merely a depth, but an entity that inhabited it? The logs from that period are fragmentary, filled with coded observations and hurried, almost panicked notations of unstable readings and unidentifiable signals. What was dismissed as equipment malfunction by his peers, the ancestor interpreted as a language, a pattern attempting to imprint itself upon their fragile human consciousness. He documented not just the trench's geography, but its burgeoning consciousness, drawing intricate, non-Euclidean patterns onto his maps, far beyond conventional cartography. These were not soundings of rock and sediment, but perhaps an attempt to transcribe the very syntax of the deep. What terror must have gripped him as he realized he was not merely observing, but being observed. The expedition returned, or what was left of it. The ancestor, however, never truly did. He vanished, leaving behind only those cryptic charts and a legacy of whispered madness. His final, desperate entries spoke not of a discovery, but of an invasion, a subtle, psychological infiltration that preyed on the very fabric of his being. The first contact was not an encounter of physical forms, but of minds, a silent, pervasive resonance that sought to bridge the chasm between species, not through dialogue, but through insidious, unwanted integration. Could this be the moment the ancient bond was forged, not with a handshake, but with a silent, consuming whisper from the dark? Dive with us into this unexplored abyssal world. What happened to that expedition, and to the moorland ancestor that cursed his lineage forever? The ceaseless roar of the Atlantic against the old lighthouse could not drown out the new, unsettling sounds emerging from within the moorland ancestral home. Lena's sleepwalking, once a disturbing but sporadic occurrence, had become a nightly ritual, an escalating dance with an unseen tormentor. Elias watched, helpless, as his sister's somnambulism transcended mere nocturnal wandering, morphing into something far more insidious. Her eyes, open but unseeing, reflected not the room around her, but a terrifying abyssal void. These were no longer simple night terrors. Lena's movements grew fluid, unnervingly graceful, as if she were moving through water, even on solid ground. Her skin, once warm with life, often felt cool to the touch, almost damp, and a faint briny scent, not of the ocean air, but of something deeper, began to cling to her. It was subtle at first, easily dismissed as a trick of the mind, a byproduct of Elias's own mounting anxiety. But then came the language. Fragmented, guttural sounds bubbling from her throat, forming syllables that twisted and turned, alien to any human tongue Elias had ever encountered. It was a language of clicks and rumbles, of deep, resonant tones that seemed to vibrate through the very foundations of the old house. She would whisper these words, sometimes shriek them, her voice distorted, primal, as she struggled against invisible bonds, her arms reaching, clawing, always towards the sea. The relentless pull was undeniable. She would make for the nearest window, the nearest door, compelled by an invisible current, driven by a terrible, unthinking instinct to return to the black waters that cradled their cursed inheritance. Elias had read about the Deepwater Revelation expedition in his ancestors' scattered journals, the cryptic charts hinting at a primordial contact. He dismissed much of it as the ravings of a man lost to the depths, perhaps even to madness. But witnessing Lena's transformation, the way her body seemed to become a conduit for something ancient and vast, shattered his skepticism. This was not a genetic quirk. This was an unfolding nightmare, a reawakening. The whispers of the lighthouse, once melancholic echoes, now felt like ominous warnings. Each night, Lena became less herself, more a vessel. Her humanity slowly eroding under the relentless pressure of this inherited burden. Elias began to document everything, meticulously, obsessively, driven by a desperate hope that understanding this terrifying regression might be the only way to save her. What intelligence could command such a transformation? And what ancient hunger could compel a human body to yearn so violently for the crushing darkness of the abyss? Perhaps Elias had expected dusty ledgers filled with forgotten shipping manifests or mundane family trees. What he unearthed, however, was a meticulously preserved, water-stained journal, tucked away in a false bottom of his great-great-grandfather's sea chest. Its leather binding was brittle, its pages brittle as ancient parchment, yet the ink on them seemed to thrum with a faint, unnatural energy. This was not merely a log, it was a testament, a confession, a descent into a madness that mirrored his sister Lena's own unraveling. The journal belonged to Thomas Moreland, the disgraced cartographer, the very ancestor whose disappearance marked the beginning of their family's torment. His script, initially precise and scientific, grew erratic, then frantic, peppered with crude, unsettling sketches of grotesque marine life and impossible geological formations. Thomas's entries meticulously documented the infamous 1873 Deepwater Revelation expedition, an undertaking shrouded in official secrecy and whispered rumor, now laid bare in horrifying detail. He spoke of depths that defied measurement, of pressures that should have crushed, yet something survived, thrived within that abyssal void. Thomas detailed a specific dive, deeper than any human had ever ventured, into a fissure within the Puerto Rico Trench. His words painted a vivid, terrifying picture. The light failed, not just our lamp, but the very light of the world seemed to dim, swallowed by an absolute blackness. And then the sound, a low, resonant hum, a vibration through the very hull that spoke of an unimaginable scale. It was not a creature's cry, but the song of a structure, a living architecture. Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine, recognizing echoes of Lena's guttural murmurings, those same deep, resonant tones. Was this the source? The subsequent entries became less scientific observation, more fevered hallucination. Thomas recounted visions of colossal, cyclopean eyes peering from the perpetual twilight, of vast, serpentine forms coiling around subaquatic mountains, and an almost magnetic draw towards an ancient, pulsating light. He described a pact, not with a being, but with a presence, an intelligence that communicated not through sound or image, but through a direct, insidious invasion of thought. It promised knowledge, offered power, in exchange for a conduit, a vessel. A blood price, Thomas scrawled, his hand trembling, for a communion that bridges worlds. This dark bargain, Elias realized with a sickening lurch, was not some ancient folklore. It was the genesis of their hereditary affliction, the somnambulism, the nightmares, Lena's terrifying transformation. These were not symptoms of a curse, but the gradual fulfillment of an ancient contract, a slow, agonizing transformation of the Moreland lineage into something else. Thomas's final entry was a single chilling question etched deeply into the brittle page. When the abyss stares back, do you dare to answer its call? The journal ended abruptly, leaving Elias with a profound sense of dread and a terrifying new piece of the puzzle. The price had been paid, and now it was being collected. The whispers of the sea grew louder in the Moreland household, no longer a distant murmur, but a guttural chant rising from Lena's very core. Elias, once able to rationalize the creeping somnambulism as a psychological distress, now faced a terrifying, undeniable reality. Lena was transforming, not merely succumbing to a nightmare, but becoming an unwilling conduit for something ancient and profoundly alien. Host's sleepwalking episodes intensified, marked by a chilling precision in their aim, the relentless pull towards the ocean. Her eyes, even in the deepest slumber, held a milky luminescence, reflecting an inner world that mirrored the crushing darkness of the abyssal plains. One night, the transformation became irrevocably clear. Elias found her by the ancient lighthouse's base, her skin oddly translucent, almost gelatinous beneath the moon's stark gaze. Her fingers, usually slender, seemed elongated, the nails brittle and dark, like polished obsidian. She was not merely attempting to reach the water, she was yearning for it, her body contorting with an unnerving flexibility, a desperate swimmer seeking the deepest trench. And then the sound. Not words, as humans know them, but a series of clicks, trills, and deep resonant hums that vibrated through the very stones of the bluff. It was a language born not of air, but of pressure, of currents, of an echoing darkness. A tongue that predated human speech, perhaps even life on land. Elias, trembling, documented every horrific detail, his camera a fragile shield against the encroaching madness, his mind grasping for the scientific anchors that were rapidly slipping away. He knew then that the family curse was not a metaphor for mental decline, but a biological, terrifying mutation. The marine archaeologists and researchers Elias had finally contacted arrived, their initial skepticism quickly dissolving into a bewildered horror. Dr. Eris Thorne, a specialist in deep-sea bioacoustics, painstakingly recorded Lena's nocturnal vocalizations. His instruments, designed to decipher the cries of whales and the echoes of tectonic shifts, registered patterns unlike anything in known terrestrial biology. Each spectral analysis revealed a complex syntax, an organized structure hinting at intelligence, but one utterly alien. What entity, they wondered, had Lena become a receiver for? What ancient message was being broadcast through her very being? The chilling implication began to dawn. This was not a psychological break, but a primordial possession, a reawakening of an ancient bond forged in the blackest depths of the Puerto Rico Trench. The family archives, now open and sprawling across Elias's study, revealed cryptic symbols that mirrored the undulating patterns of Lena's vocalizations, connecting the ancient cartographer's madness directly to his great-great-granddaughter's terrifying descent. Are you ready to uncover the secrets of the deep and the chilling truth of what the abyss demands? Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal may change your perception of the oceans forever. The faint, rhythmic pulse that began to emanate from Lena's very chest, mirroring the deep thrumming of distant seismic activity, begged the question, was she merely transmitting, or was she becoming the very manifestation of the trench's silent, monstrous heart? Lena's affliction tightened its grip, a silent storm consuming her. Her somnambulistic episodes drew her to the bluff's edge, eyes fixed on the vast, churning Atlantic. The fragmented words she uttered now cohered into alien phrases, a language of clicks, whistles, and a low, resonant hum. It vibrated through the old lighthouse timbers, a sound devoid of human phonetics, echoing the abyssal deep's mournful song. Elias meticulously recorded these utterances, scouring linguistic databases, finding no match, only mounting despair. His desperate dive into the moorland archives yielded not just cryptic charts, but the personal journals of Tobias Moreland. The brittle, saltwater-stained pages revealed a man unraveling, transformed from within. Tobias's earliest entries spoke of a malaise afflicting the 1873 Deepwater Revelation crew after their Puerto Rico trench descent. Shared somnambulism, vivid nightmares of crushing darkness and colossal unseen forms. But it was Tobias's later writings that seized Elias, chilling him. They detailed his own body's inexplicable changes, subtle skin thickening, heightened pressure sensitivity, an instinctive urge for water. Terrifyingly, he had transcribed in his fevered hand the very guttural, resonant sounds Lena now produced, labeling them the whispers of the benthic realm, the true language of the profound darkness. This shocking corroboration sent tremors through Elias's research team. He presented findings to his marine archaeologists and researchers, hardened scientists. Dr. Eris Thorne, an authority on abyssal ecosystems, initially dismissed Tobias's accounts as ravings of a mind broken by isolation or deep-sea narcosis. Hallucinations, Thorne posited, his voice cautious. Yet Elias noted a nascent discomfort in Thorne's eyes, betraying the evidence's unsettling power. Dr. Anya Sharma, specializing in ancient maritime folklore, showed more intrigue. She cited obscure legends of water-bound spirits from pre-colonial Caribbean oral traditions. Tales once dismissed as superstition now, through Tobias's lens, gained sinister, literal truth. These myths spoke of humans becoming conduits for deep-sea entities, marked by physiological transformations and altered consciousness. Lena's condition, once a medical anomaly, now echoed centuries of forgotten lore, gaining terrifying, ancient provenance. The tension within Elias's collective surged. Pragmatic scientists grappled with data defying their paradigms. Elias wrestled with the agonizing reality. Lena was not just ill, but transforming, becoming something both more and less than human. Her sounds grew more frequent, more insistent, raw, profound calls to an unseen audience, heard only by those marked by the ancient bond. The lighthouse, once a beacon, now felt like a crucible. Are you ready to uncover the secrets of the deep? For the true horror was not merely what Lena was becoming, but what she was summoning. Lena's descent had become a terrifying, irreversible plunge into the unknown. Her somnambulistic episodes no longer confined themselves to the house. She now wandered, driven by an unseen current, directly towards the tumultuous coastline. Elias, frantic, observed her transformations with a chilling clarity. Her skin, once so vibrant, took on an unnatural translucence, and her eyes, when she was in these trances, seemed to reflect an abyssal light, devoid of human warmth. The guttural sounds she made intensified, evolving into fragmented, rhythmic utterances that pulsed with an ancient cadence, echoing the very roar of the ocean itself. Elias's initial search through the family archives had yielded unsettling connections, but it was the discovery of a small, leather-bound diary tucked away in a false bottom of his ancestor's sea chest that truly shattered his world. This wasn't just a logbook. It was a testament to madness, or perhaps a terrifying truth. Its pages, brittle with age, were filled not with navigational charts, but with frantic, looping sketches of impossibly vast forms glimpsed in the deep, accompanied by a script that defied any known human language. Yet, Elias recognized fragments of the sounds Lena now made, a horrifying synchronicity. The cartographer, his ancestor, referred to them as the whisperers of the deep, beings whose presence resonated not just through water, but through the very bloodline. One entry, scrawled in a moment of undeniable terror, detailed a phenomenon he called the calling, a telepathic summons that grew stronger with proximity to specific abyssal vents within the trench. It described how his own crewmates, one by one, had begun to hear it, succumbing to a strange euphoria before vanishing into the churning depths. This contradicted the official records of the expedition, which spoke of sudden storms and equipment failures, a convenient narrative for inexplicable disappearances. The marine archaeologists Elias had brought into his confidence, initially skeptical, found their scientific rigor challenged by the sheer consistency of the anomalies. Using advanced sonar, they began mapping the Puerto Rico Trench with unprecedented detail, focusing on areas Elias's ancestor had cryptically marked. What they discovered sent a chill through even the most jaded among them. Geological formations that defied conventional plate tectonics, appearing almost sculpted, or perhaps grown. These weren't natural rifts. They were too precise, too geometric, scattered across the very points where the ancestral diary indicated the whisperers held sway. One particular anomaly, a vast, pulsating energy signature emanating from beneath a seemingly impenetrable basaltic dome, refused to be categorized. It was not geothermal. It pulsed with an unnerving regularity, like a colossal, living heart beating at the ocean's core. Could this be the source of the calling and Lena's horrifying affliction? Or was it merely another layer of the oceanic veil, hiding an even more profound and terrifying truth? The very fabric of the deep seemed to stretch and tear around the Moreland family, pulling them into a nightmare that defied every known principle of geology and biology. What was it about these specific coordinates, this particular family, that resonated with such ancient, chilling power? And if the ocean could truly remember, what dark designs were stirring beneath the waves, poised to claim not just a single lineage, but perhaps the very surface world itself? The sun beat down on the parched earth of the bluff, yet inside the moorland home, An inexplicable chill permeated the air. Lena's episodes, once confined to the unsettling hours of deep night, now encroached upon their days, her vacant eyes fixed on the distant, shimmering expanse of the Atlantic. This somnambulism had morphed, no longer a mere wandering, but a desperate, almost violent drive towards the shore. Elias had secured the house, reinforced every lock, but the ocean's pull on his sister was a palpable, terrifying force. Her body, once delicate, seemed to be undergoing a subtle, grotesque metamorphosis. The skin on her hands and feet grew strangely thick, almost leathery, and her nails elongated, hardening into something akin to talons. It was a regression, not to a primordial human state, but to something far older, something forged in an environment alien to our own. The guttural sounds that escaped her lips had also evolved. No longer just fragmented syllables, they coalesced into short, repeated phrases. Elias, with the help of the marine linguist Dr. Eris Thorne, a man whose initial skepticism had curdled into a palpable dread, had begun the painstaking process of recording and analyzing these utterances. The results were chilling. The phonemes defied known human vocalizations, twisting vowels and consonants into forms that seemed to require a different kind of throat, a different kind of breath. Yet, within the chaos, Thorne identified patterns, repetitions, a language, yes, but one that defied earthly origin, or perhaps predated it. One phrase, repeated endlessly during Lena's most profound trances, became a terrifying mantra. Catharil, Devorm, Mal. Thorne, pale and trembling, could only offer a speculative translation, cobbled together from obscure, dead languages, and a desperate leap of intuition. Awaken, consume, inherit. It was a message, not just a symptom. A direct communication, bleeding through the fragile veil of Lena's consciousness. From whatever primordial intelligence stirred in the abyss. This was not a passive curse. It was an active invitation, or perhaps a command. The transformation was accelerating, visible not just in Lena's physical state, but in the very air around her. A faint, almost imperceptible scent, like ozone mixed with ancient brine, now clung to her. The house itself seemed to hum with an unseen energy when Lena was in her altered state, as if the very walls resonated with the whispers from the deep. Elias found himself constantly checking the windows, the doors, convinced that the ocean itself was reaching out, not just for Lena, but for all of them. This wasn't just a family affliction. It was an unfolding event, a prelude to something monumental. The very first direct contact. What did this language mean for Lena? What did it demand? If it sought to awaken, to consume, to inherit, what then would become of humanity's dominion over the surface world? Are you ready to uncover the secrets of the deep? Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal may change your perception of the oceans forever. The oceanic adventure is just beginning. The shadow that had crept into Lena's days now devoured her nights whole. Her somnambulism, once a haunting sleepwalk, transformed into a terrifying spectacle of physical distortion. Her skin, perpetually clammy, sometimes took on a faintly iridescent sheen, like the scales of an ancient deep-sea fish. Her fingers, disturbingly, seemed to elongate during these episodes, questing for something unseen, while her breath hitched into a wet, rasping sound. The guttural sounds she uttered were no longer mere babble. Fragments of sound emerged, possessing a strange, resonant cadence that defied any known linguistic origin. It was a language not meant for human vocal cords, a chorus from a world alien and primordial. Elias, desperate, had brought the brightest minds he could find to the weathered lighthouse. Dr. Eris Thorne, a marine geophysicist renowned for his work on tectonic anomalies, and Dr. Evelyn Reed, an ethnolinguist specializing in dead languages, initially approached the Moreland family's claims with academic detachment, attributing them to a complex interplay of inherited psychological trauma and local folklore. They meticulously sifted through Elias's family archives, a labyrinth of water-stained logs, cryptic maps, and the fragmented journal entries of the disgraced cartographer. The 1873 Deepwater Revelation Expedition, dismissed by mainstream history as a minor tragedy, began to reveal itself as something far more sinister than a simple maritime mishap. Yet it was not the dusty papers alone that began to shift their paradigm. It was the increasingly undeniable correlation between Lena's escalating episodes and a series of hydroacoustic anomalies being registered by Thorne's remote sensors positioned near the trench. These weren't the predictable rumblings of subduction zones. They were rhythmic pulses, almost like a deliberate communication, emanating from depths previously thought too extreme for any complex sound propagation. The frequencies were impossibly low, vibrating through the bedrock and resonating with a primeval hum that Thorne, despite his decades of experience, could not categorize. Reed, observing Lena during one of her terrifying trances, noted a chilling synchronicity. The guttural vocalizations of Lena seemed to rise and fall in harmony with these abyssal echoes. It was as if Lena's very physiology had been recalibrated, transforming her into a living, breathing transducer, receiving and emitting these unearthly frequencies. The data plots from Thorne's sensors began to form patterns eerily reminiscent of neurological wave functions. Not geological shifts. This was not merely an echo, it was a conversation, a call and response across impossible distances, linking the fragile human body to the crushing pressure of the deep. They had stumbled upon a horrifying truth. Lena was not just suffering a curse, she was becoming an unwilling conduit. The implications were staggering. Could Lena's very being be an instrument, vibrating to the tune of something ancient and terrible, stirring in the deepest parts of the Puerto Rico Trench? What unholy resonance was being forged between human flesh and the silent, crushing darkness of the abyss? And what purpose did this primordial communication serve, if not to reclaim what it believed was its own? The journey into Elias's ancestral archives had become less an archaeological dig and more an excavation of a psychological ruin. Dust-choked journals and faded charts, meticulously preserved, yet deliberately obscured, whispered of a past unwilling to remain buried. The disgraced cartographer, their progenitor, had been dismissed by history as a tragic footnote, a victim of the sea's capricious nature. But Elias knew, with Lena's increasingly terrifying regressions, that the truth was far more insidious, a deliberate suppression. And then, amidst a forgotten collection of navigational instruments, he found it. A small, leather-bound logbook, its clasp corroded shut by decades of neglect, labeled simply DR 1873. This wasn't merely a log of soundings and bearings. It was a testament of a descent, both literal and existential. The entries, penned in a frantic, deteriorating hand, detailed not the scientific triumphs expected of the Deepwater Revelation expedition, but a creeping horror. The cartographer, Elias's own ancestor, had observed anomalies that went beyond uncharted currents or unusual marine life. He spoke of echoes from below, of unnatural resonance emanating from the deepest points of the trench. The breakthrough came on a page near the book's center, a sketch less of a map and more a diagram of energy, a complex web of lines converging on a point labeled Nexus Aeternum. Next to it, a chilling, almost feverish confession. We sought not life, but passage. We did not map the depths, we awakened them. This single phrase shattered Elias's understanding of his family's plight. The expedition hadn't been an accident of fate, yet a deliberate, albeit misguided, attempt to exploit something ancient. The cartographer's cryptic charts weren't just navigational aids. They were attempts to contain or channel something, or perhaps to guide future generations back to it. The logbook described a specific ritual, a sequence of acoustic pulses designed to harmonize with the deep. It was a horrifying echo of Lena's guttural incantations, which Elias had recorded and desperately tried to decipher. The language Lena spoke wasn't random. It was, horrifyingly, a fragment of this very ritual, passed down through generations, dormant until now. The discovery implied not just an ancient bond, but a contract, sealed in the abyssal darkness by their own lineage. The Moorlands weren't simply afflicted. They were, in some terrifying sense, instruments. The logbook's final entries were fragmented, almost illegible, detailing a frantic retreat, a sense of something clinging to the hull, a hungry whisper following, and then a final scrawled warning. The debt is generational. It will not be forgotten. It will demand its inheritors. The tension in the room was palpable, a cold dread seeping from the pages. What terrifying truth had his ancestor truly uncovered? And what price was the family now truly paying for that revelation? The answers, Elias knew, lay deeper still, within the very heart of the phantom abyss. We had theorized about Lena Moreland's affliction, meticulously categorizing symptoms, analyzing biological markers. No hypothesis, however audacious, prepared us for the visceral reality that unfolded within the ancient walls of the Moreland Lighthouse. The air grew heavy, a preternatural humidity clinging to every surface as Lena's episodes intensified. The somnambulism, once a haunting sleepwalk, transformed into something predatory, a restless urge bordering on desperation. She no longer merely wandered. She strained, her body contorting, her singular focus fixed on the unforgiving Atlantic. The night it truly manifested, a tempest raged outside, mirroring the turmoil within. Lightning tore through the sky, illuminating the salt-stained glass, as Lena's guttural utterances escalated from whispers to a resonant, melodic hum vibrating through the timbers. But it was the visual transformation that shattered our composure, pushing the boundaries of scientific understanding. Beneath the flickering lamplight, her skin, unnaturally pale, took on an unsettling translucence, an opalescent quality. A faint, bioluminescent sheen flickered across her forearms, mirroring the cold glow of deep-sea creatures. Then, with a chilling gasp from Elias, we witnessed it, a subtle, distinct web-like pattern emerging between her fingers, her toes, as if her physiology was grotesquely adapting, preparing for an environment no human could endure. Her eyes, usually placid blue, were now a deep, unsettling indigo, reflecting light in an almost predatory way. This was not merely a psychological break. It was a profound corporeal shift, a horrifying testament to an external influence. Dr. Eris Thorne, our lead marine biologist, a man of empirical science, recoiled, his face a mask of profound disbelief, his breath hitched. He spoke of adaptive evolution in trembling tones, but the term felt inadequate, almost blasphemous. It wasn't evolution, it was far more sinister, a forced regression, a grotesque possession. Lena was not just pulled towards the sea, she was being remade by it, her human form dissolving under an ancient alien will. The most bizarre discovery, however, was not Lena's terrifying physical state, but the chilling realization that her strange, resonant vocalizations seemed to respond with eerie synchronicity to unique seismic activity we had tracked from the Puerto Rico Trench. Our sophisticated hydrophones, deployed miles offshore, had been picking up an anomalous rhythmic pulse, a low-frequency thrumming that defied any known geological or biological source. As Lena's humming reached its crescendo, the anomalous pulse from the abyssal depths simultaneously intensified, creating a horrifying, almost demonic symphony between the suffering girl and the unseen, malevolent power residing in the ocean's darkest heart. Was this the ancient bond Lena was fulfilling? Was her accelerating transformation a ghastly, living echo of those first ill-fated deep-water expeditions, a grotesque manifestation of the abyssal entity's insidious reach into our world? The questions hung heavy, pressing down with the weight of untold millennia. We were no longer simply observing a medical anomaly. We were witnessing a biological, almost spiritual tether being pulled taut, threatening to drag Lena, and perhaps all of humanity, into an unimaginable abyss. What primordial force could orchestrate such a profound metamorphosis, bending flesh and bone to its unfathomable purpose? The guttural sounds emanating from Lena's lips had long been dismissed as the fevered babbling of a mind in torment, the tragic crescendo of a broken psyche. But Elias, clinging to the tattered fragments of his ancestors' cursed legacy, refused to accept such simple answers. He sought a different truth, a harsher reality. He brought in Dr. Eris Thorne, a reclusive linguist whose expertise lay in the echoes of forgotten tongues and the spectral whispers of dead civilizations, a scholar whose unconventional methods often skirted the edge of the esoteric. Thorne, captivated by the unique, unsettling phonetic patterns emerging from Lena's somnambulistic trances, painstakingly cross-referenced her utterances against ancient nautical chants, against folkloric incantations rumored to summon things from the deep, and even against hypothesized pre-human vocalizations found in discredited anthropological texts. His findings were a chilling revelation, not a known language, yet eerily consistent. A twisted echo of something primordial, something that spoke not of words, but of pure pressure, of abyssal vastness, and an inhuman patience. It was, Thorne posited with a tremor, a lexicon of the deep, whispered into existence through the fracturing consciousness of his sister. Simultaneously, the tattered, salt-stained charts left by the disgraced cartographer were yielding their own horrifying secrets. What once appeared as crude, nonsensical doodles at the fringes of known maritime routes, mere artistic license, or the ravings of a mind unhinged by the deep, now coalesced into a precise, albeit arcane, map. Not of surface geography as humanity understood it, but of currents unseen, of thermoclines that twisted like spectral rivers through the dark, and, most unnervingly, of focal points within the very heart of the Puerto Rico Trench itself. These weren't just depths. They were locations, marked with symbols that mirrored, with horrifying precision, the very guttural phonetics Dr. Thorne was deciphering. A terrifying synergy began to emerge, a silent symphony of dread. Lena was speaking the language of a place depicted on the maps, a place the moorland ancestor had not merely charted, but interacted with, opening a conduit that now, generations later, demanded its due. The most disturbing revelations slammed into Elias with the force of an abyssal wave when a particular symbol, recurring throughout the ancestral charts and unsettlingly present in Lena's most intense episodes, was finally identified. It wasn't a navigational mark, nor an indicator of depth or a warning of unseen dangers. Dr. Thorne, his face pale, suggested it was a glyph, a sigil, not for a creature, but for a state of being, a transformation. It spoke of a convergence, a fusion of surface and depth, a becoming. The terrifying implication was stark, undeniable. Lena wasn't merely possessed. She was undergoing a metamorphosis, a terrifying, irreversible shift. She was becoming a bridge, a living conduit, her very flesh reforming to serve an ancient purpose. The curse wasn't just claiming them, it was changing them, preparing them. Preparing them for what or for whom? What ancient pact did his ancestor truly forge in the crushing darkness of the 1873 Deepwater Revelation? And what horrifying, primordial price was now being exacted, not just on Lena's fading humanity, but on the very future of the moorland lineage? The oceanic reckoning was not a distant threat. It was already underway, within their own blood. Lena's descent was no longer a silent nocturnal affliction. It had become a waking terror, a visible, visceral transformation that defied medical explanation and shattered the fragile veneer of normalcy the moorlands desperately clung to. Her eyes, once a familiar shade of hazel, now seemed to hold an unnatural luminescence, a faint, almost reptilian gleam that pulsed with an unknown agenda. The guttural whispers had grown in frequency, no longer fragmented, but forming longer, more complex patterns. A language that echoed the primordial churn of the ocean floor, devoid of human inflection. Elias, with the aid of the marine linguists, had begun to piece together fleeting phonemes, horrifyingly consistent across her episodes, hinting at words like retur, depth, and a chilling repeated phrase, "The firstborn awakens." This phrase, vibrating with ancient malevolence, ignited a cold dread in Elias's heart, a premonition of something truly cataclysmic. It wasn't merely a curse on his family. It was a prelude to a wider, unfathomable event. The researchers, initially skeptical, were now gripped by a scientific fascination bordering on terror. Dr. Eris Thorne, the lead oceanographer, whose instruments had for months yielded only ambiguous anomalies within the trench, reported a sudden, dramatic shift. Not seismic activity, not a geological event, but a profound energetic signature emanating from the deepest part of the Challenger Deep, a signature unlike anything ever recorded. It pulsed, grew, and seemed to resonate with the very frequencies Lena was now uttering. Could her deteriorating state be a beacon, a conduit for something awakening in the abyssal darkness? The correlation was too stark, too terrifying to ignore. Elias frantically revisited his ancestors' journals, the cryptic charts now illuminated by Lena's horrifying revelations. A forgotten marginalia, almost illegible, spoke of a primordial current, a hidden pathway beneath the very crust of the earth, leading not to a physical chamber, but to a consciousness, a slumbering intelligence that had merely dreamed for millennia. The 1873 Deepwater Revelation expedition hadn't just discovered new depths. They had inadvertently nudged awake a titan. And the blood price was not merely a life, but the complete assimilation of a lineage. A chosen vessel to bridge the two worlds, allowing the ancient entity to manifest, to walk among us once more. The implications were catastrophic. Lena was not just suffering, she was being prepared. Her body was becoming a living gateway, a biological anchor for an entity whose true form was beyond human comprehension, a being perhaps composed of pure thought, or something far older than matter itself. The lighthouse, that stoic sentinel, seemed to groan in protest, its old stones vibrating with a low hum that mirrored the pulses from the trench. It was a prison, a beacon, and perhaps a final sacrificial altar. Are you ready to grasp the true horror of this reawakening? What happens when the ancient past doesn't just resurface, but walks among us?